Hey guys! So I was going through my makeup collection recently and realizing that I have a lot of comparable drugstore and high-end products that I was curious to test side by side. So today we're going to be doing a wear test with a full face of high-end products on one side of my face and a full face of drugstore products on the other. Leave your guesses in the comments below. Which side of my face do you think has the drugstore products and which side do you think has the high-end products? Really curious to hear what you guys think. None of the products that I'm comparing today are necessarily dupes for each other. We might stumble across some really similar products, like pretty close dupes in this video, but for the most part, I was just going for products that are comparable, that achieve a similar purpose, even if they're not really dupes for each other. I really just wanted to find out if I end up being more satisfied with an all high-end look or an all drugstore look, or if there really is no difference. So really excited to put these products to the test. Let's go ahead and try them on. I thought it would be really interesting to compare the e.l.f. Jelly Pop Primer with the Milk Makeup Hydro Grip Primer. I feel like I still haven't really gotten to know this primer very well. I don't really know where I stand on it, how I feel on it necessarily. I think I like the e.l.f. Jelly Pop Primer better just in the way that it gives my skin that beautiful glow. I don't feel like the Milk Makeup one quite does that same thing. But I'm gonna have my right side be the drugstore side and my left side will be the high-end side. So I'll do about half a pump since I normally do a full pump of the e.l.f. Jelly Pop Primer to just this right side of my face. And I'm focusing it mainly on areas of my face that either tend to get dry or where makeup just tends to start looking bad throughout the day. But I really pat it all around. I just mainly focus it in like this region because I feel like this is where makeup usually tends to break apart on me. And I'm even going to take a little tiny dab of that on my under eye just for a little added grip and hydration. So then the Milk Makeup Hydro Grip. This is a similar primer to the e.l.f. one in that it is also a gripping primer, but it has a little bit more of a velvety, smooth consistency as you blend it out. It doesn't feel quite as sticky as the e.l.f. one. So if you prefer something less sticky, then this might be a good option. And then I'll do the same on this side. I'll just do a little dab on my under eye as well. For my base complexion product, I thought it would be fun to put two skin tints that are at completely opposite ends of the price spectrum side by side. So these are the two that I'm going to compare today. We have the AOA CC Cream. I really love this CC cream. It's like $1.55 or something around there. And the Ilia Skin Tint, which I also adore, but this one is $48. So it is like, what would that be? Like 25 times the price of the AOA CC cream. So I kind of just want to see how these compare. Obviously these are two very different products. So starting off with the AOA CC cream, full disclosure that I did work with Shop Miss A on a sponsored video last month, but this video is not sponsored. The shade is definitely a little bit yellow for me, but because this is really like a skin tint level of coverage, it really blends out just fine on my skin. I mean, I love the finish of this on my skin. I think it has a great amount of coverage for a CC cream. It's really exactly the amount of coverage I would expect. It kind of just evens out my skin tone. It does have more coverage than something like a tinted sunscreen, which is barely any coverage. This does just smooth out my overall skin tone, and I really like the slightly glowy finish that it gives. I was also having a little bit of dryness today, and I don't notice this clinging to any of my dry areas. For the other side, the Ilia Skin Tint, of course, this one does have SPF 40. The AOA CC cream doesn't have any SPF, so that is one difference. My favorite way to apply this is actually with my fingers. This one has a much more serum-like texture, so it just has a different feel on the skin than something like the AOA CC cream. Almost has the feel of like a facial oil in a way, but it has actually really solid coverage. That one is definitely a lot glowier than the AOA CC cream. The AOA has a much more subtle glow. The Ilia, especially if you don't set it, I mean, it is definitely like glazed donut level of dew. I like to just tap over it with a brush when I'm done, just to smooth out any possible like streaky areas or anything. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I definitely think the Ilia side looks more high-end to me. I think part of that is because the shade match is so obviously better for my skin tone than the AOA CC cream, especially when they're side by side on my face. You can really tell the difference, but when I wear the AOA CC cream alone, I don't think it's nearly as noticeable that the shade is slightly off. The CC cream does come in a decent, like, pretty even gradient of shades from light to deep, but there obviously aren't going to be very many undertone options within this line, whereas the Ilia skin tint has a ton of different shade options. So that's another benefit of, you know, just a higher budget brand. But I have to say, I like the end result of both sides. Before I go in with concealer, I did want to compare these two color correctors. So for the Drugstore side, I have the Revolution Eye Bright Corrector in the shade light to medium. I definitely think they were trying to dupe the Becca under eye corrector. This has a very similar texture to that one. Very, like, almost tacky, very emollient, super creamy, but a little bit sticky. And then the Sigma corrector, it has two sides. This is also in the shade light to medium. So let's do the Revolution one first. I literally just tap my finger in there and it almost melts onto my finger. And you can see it's kind of thick. This is a great corrector if you want a super brightening effect. I mean, look at that. It really does brighten up the under eye significantly. Now, I do want to say this under eye, for whatever reason, it just is more apparent on this side. Like, my under eye is just a little bit darker on this side. I think it's just the way that my face is shaped. So the Sigma one and then the concealer on this side as well will be at a bit of a disadvantage. So I'm just mixing both of these shades together. It's a little bit less brightening. If I were to just use this lighter shade, it's a little bit more brightening. So I'll take some of that on just the darkest areas. There is the comparison there, but you can see the Revolution one has a lot more of a pinky salmon undertone, and the Sigma one is just a bit more peachy. The other thing about the Revolution one is that it is really, really luminous. Like, my eye is so shiny. I don't necessarily love that for my under eyes. I think I've learned I prefer a more matte under eye finish. Adding some concealer now. I wanted to test the NYX Bear With Me Concealer Serum next to the Tarte Shape Tape Creamy Concealer. Honestly, I feel like these are pretty similar. If you like a hydrating concealer, I think both of these are great. So applying the NYX Bear With Me to this under eye, I love the undertone of this one. This is the shade Light. It's really my perfect match. I love the shade of this. These days I prefer a brush for blending out my under eye concealer. This one is the BK Beauty A506. This is pretty much the only concealer brush I use, and I love it. And the Tarte Shape Tape Creamy. I do think this one is a little bit thicker than the NYX one. Perhaps a little more coverage as well, but we'll see. I know this isn't really a scientific comparison either, since we are layering each product with a completely different set of products. Like, for example, that Milk Makeup Primer could be affecting how I like this concealer and corrector combo. But I really just wanted to compare a full face of Drugstore versus a full face of high-end and just see which one generally wears better across the board, not necessarily looking at each individual product's performance, although I think it will be interesting to see how everything holds up. I'm really excited to see how these two powders compare. On the Drugstore side, we have the CoverGirl Clean Fresh Pressed Powder. This has been one of my favorites for a couple years now. And then on the high-end side, this isn't a really expensive high-end brand, but it still is sold at Sephora, so I consider it a high-end brand, the LYS Triple Fix Translucent Setting Powder. I did recently repress this. If you saw my makeup chore day vlog from a couple days ago, that was so much fun. But I did repress this in that vlog, and I have tested it since then. The powder does seem to be performing just as well as it did before repressing, so I'm going to assume that this is an accurate comparison, even though it has been repressed. I'm going to use both of these on both the under eyes and the face, making sure to tap out any creasing ahead of time. Very curious to see which one I like better on the under eyes. I tend to prefer loose powder on the under eyes, but of these two, I think I do have a preference actually for the CoverGirl one. It just tends to look a little bit less dry. Yeah, and I also think that LYS powder sometimes causes my concealer to oxidize just the slightest bit, turns it just a little bit yellow, and that I don't love. Other than that, though, I think they both look pretty good. I do find that sometimes the LYS one can also make my under eyes just look a little bit crepey and dry. I'm also going to set the rest of my face with both of those powders. So first, the CoverGirl. I always love this CoverGirl powder. It manages to completely set my makeup, just give a nice even matte finish without looking heavy or cakey. I always like to set that Ilias skin tint because I don't love having quite this much glow on my face. I feel like I get cat hair stuck to my face so easily if I leave it unset. But yeah, this is the first video I'm filming with my fall decorations in the background, and it is making me so happy right now. I cannot even tell you. I have a little candle burning in the background. It smells so good. Just feels like fall in here, and I could not be happier. I have two pretty similar bronzers to compare today. One of them is just a little bit deeper than the other, and that is the more affordable one. This is the AOA Studio Perfect Bronzer in the shade Frappe. I like this because it is sheer but buildable, so even though the shade is a little bit deeper than what I would normally pick for a bronzer, it's very easy to control and I don't end up with a muddy or like overly deep bronzer look. So that's going to be our drugstore side. The high-end side is another one of my favorites. This is the Fenty Sunstalker bronzer in the shade In the Sun. I love this one. This one is, you can see, just a little bit lighter and perhaps a tiny bit cooler than the AOA one. But here's a side-by-side swatch comparison of those. We have the AOA over here and the Fenty over here. So really similar tone, just a slightly different depth. So starting with the AOA side, I like that both of these also have a little bit of a red undertone. I always feel like that looks the most natural on my skin tone. Really can't argue with that. I think that looks so nice, just the right depth. And then over here, going in with the Fenty. Those actually look pretty similar once they're on the skin. The Fenty one does just look a little bit lighter, but I feel like you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell that I'm wearing two different bronzers today. And I think they both look beautiful. I have to say, I mean, I like the Fenty one just a little bit more. I definitely still think I can tell the difference in price between the two and just the way this blends and the way it looks on my skin. It just looks so incredibly seamless on my skin. It just melts in so perfectly every time, and I love it. So I would have to say, at least right now, I do like the Fenty one more, but I also really like the AOA side. It just doesn't feel quite as luxurious. I've been saying for a while that I think the shades of these two blushes are incredibly similar, but we're gonna see just how true that is once they're on the cheeks. The drugstore one I have is the Kokie Soft Gradient Blush in Bellissima. If you've been on my channel for a while, then you've definitely heard about this blush because I rave about it nonstop. And the high-end one is actually the Sigma blush in the shade Cor de Rosa. And it's so funny because if you just showed me this blush on its own, I would never say that looks a lot like Kokie Bellissima, you know, like it looks very different to me. And I think a lot of that is because it has this rose gold packaging around it, but when you look at it right next to Kokie Bellissima, you can see the shades are actually really similar. First, going in with the Kokie, and I just try to grab an even mix of both shades, and I will kind of tap it off on my little cloth here before applying it, just because it can be a little pigmented. Like it is a red blush, so I do have to try not to go overboard. Sigma one is also quite pigmented, so I'm also tapping off my brush before I apply it. Ooh. So there are those two beautiful shades. I do feel like the Kokie one, this one can get out of hand quickly because that red shade is so deep. But I do think that because the Sigma one is just one even shade all across the pan rather than a gradient, it's just a little bit easier to control than the Kokie one. So I feel like I had just a little bit of an easier time applying the Sigma one and blending it out, actually, applying them side by side like this. So I still love my Kokie one, obviously, and you can get a very similar shade with the Kokie one if you don't want to spend the money on the Sigma, but I do think that looks beautiful. Here are our two highlighter competitors. We have the Revolution Highlighter Reloaded in the shade Just My Type, which is actually pretty new to me. And then another one from Sigma. This is the Sigma highlighter in the shade Sizzle. This Revolution highlighter is really intense. So I try to grab a very small amount on my brush, but if you like a blinding highlighter, this is a nice one. And then the Sigma highlighter in Sizzle. This one I have to use a pretty light hand with, otherwise it can look a little too dark on me. Both of those I would say give off a similar finish, a similar amount of shine. I do just feel like that Sigma one is looking a little bit smoother, but it could be because I have a little bit of texture here on this cheekbone. I've been testing out both of these eyeshadow primers. I first was just testing the Rare Beauty one, but I haven't been loving this one, so I wanted to try and see if the Alter Ego one ended up being better. But I'm still pretty new to the Alter Ego one, so I'm really curious to test these side by side. So we've got the Rare Beauty over here on the high-end side. Then on the affordable side, we have the Alter Ego eyeshadow base. While I let that eyeshadow primer set, I'm going to go ahead and apply my brow products. So my affordable side is from the brand I'm Mimi, I think is how it's pronounced. I think it's pronounced I'm Mimi, or it might be I'm Meme, but I think this is a sister brand to Kaja, and this is their micro thin brow pencil. And this is actually in a shade that I normally is actually deeper than I would normally apply in my brows, but I've been having fun trying it out. This is the shade Natural Brown, but the nice thing about this is it's very easy to get like a very soft hair-like stroke, and this is one of those pencils that's actually in the shape of an oval. I really am liking this oval tip. I think that's really nice because I can hold it at various different angles to get different size strokes. And I don't feel like it looks too dark in my brows either. Definitely isn't pulling too warm, and that's really the main thing that I try to avoid. And of course, ABH Dip Brow Pomade is always just a solid pick for the brows. It just never lets me down. I do think the I'm Mimi side ended up a lot softer and just more natural looking. This one looks very natural, but I still was able to get my brows nice and filled in. I got a bit of a more structured brow over here on the ABH side. I still like the look though, because I feel like it still looks nice and soft. I use a pretty light hand with that, but I don't know. I actually don't know which side I prefer. I like them both. I think I might like wearing these together too, like maybe using the dip brow in the tail of my brow and the pencil just in the front. I might try that at some point. I wanted to compare two cream shadows that aren't really similar in shade, but they are somewhat similar formulas, just in different types of packaging. On the Drugstore side, we have one of my favorite products of the year so far, I have to say. This is one of my favorite products of 2023, the Hard Candy Eye Def eyeshadow stick in Stoned. It's this beautiful gray taupe, and I just love it. It's matte. It makes a beautiful, just very natural looking one and done shadow. Then on the other side, we have a very hyped up eyeshadow at the moment. This is the Merit Solo Shadow in the shade Studio. It's kind of hard to get the cap off. I also would be curious to test these without eyeshadow primer underneath, but I also really wanted to test those two eyeshadow primers, so these will just have an even better chance of staying power, I guess. So there's the Hard Candy. Actually, you know what I think might be a better shade? I was gonna do Studio, but then I just realized Viper, which is the other shade that they sent, this might look better next to that taupe, I'm thinking. Yeah, there's what that swatch. Let's try this shade. This is the shade I haven't tried yet either, so I'm just gonna tap this on with my finger. This is actually like a true first impression with this product. I have used Studio, really enjoyed it. And if you remember a long time ago, I complained about Merit because they had reached out to send PR when the brand was first launching. I think this was in 2021. And they were asking creators, and specifically smaller creators, because I talked to a creator that was a little bit larger and it was not the case for her, but they were asking creators to sign a contract in exchange for PR that would give the brand the rights to any content that you make using their products, which left a very bad taste in my mouth. Other brands have done that since then. They were the first brand that I experienced that with, though. So ever since then, it has just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. These I did receive in PR through the affiliate linking platform that I use called Howl. And that was not a requirement this time to receive the PR. So, you know, I've been really curious to try Merit and just see what all the hype is about. So I have to say, I feel like that shade is going on just a teeny bit uneven, a little patchy. I didn't notice that with Studio, but then again, Studio is a shade that's just closer to my skin tone. I'm gonna try to just pick some of it up on the brush and see if that applies it a little bit more evenly. Okay, I think that looks a little bit better. I don't want to stop there with eyeshadows because I really want to use the new Nomad Ghost Town palette on this high-end side. I've been loving these shimmers, and I actually think the shimmer texture of this is pretty comparable to the Flower Desert Lights textures. Very creamy. I think I want to stick with the green theme and go in with the shade Gold Rush, which is like a green gold, on top of Viper. Let's see how that looks. Ooh. Yeah, these shimmers are really beautiful. Just for the fun of it, let's also take some of the shade Calico California, which is a little bit of a more medium green. I don't think I've used this one yet. Look at that. I'm just going to tap that in the center. And I found I really like this flower palette over that Hard Candy shadow stick. I'm actually going to take some of this gold shade. That's the shade Soul. And that's going to be my lid shade. Just tapping that on the lid. I've really been liking a gray taupe and gold or copper. I think that just looks so nice. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the shade Horizon, which is almost like a taupey rose. That I'm applying in the center. Love that. Okay, so two very different eye looks. Good thing I'm not going anywhere today, so we can see how they wear. I'll still try to do like some yoga or something so we can give it a solid test. I only have one brow gel right now. It's the Milk Kush Clear Brow Gel. I'm just going to go in with a little of that on both sides. I'm going to take a little bit of the Hard Candy shadow stick down onto my lower lash line. I don't have any eyeliners that I wanted to test today, so I'm just going to redefine that here in the outer corner as well. And doing the same with Viper on this side, I'm just going to take that down on the lower lash line, and I'm using the Merit brush as well. My Drugstore mascara, I've really been loving this one lately. This is the Revolution 5D Lash Pal Volumizing Mascara. This is definitely very volumizing and very lengthening. Gives that really nice dramatic lash look. And then this high-end mascara also claims to be volumizing. This is the Milk Kush Mascara. Also has a similar brush actually to the Revolution one. I'll show you side by side. So the black wand is the Revolution and the silver wand is the Milk. So the shape is similar. The Revolution one is just a little bit thicker. I haven't been as big a fan of this Milk mascara. I just don't feel like it does quite as much for my lashes, isn't quite as volumizing, and I just feel like it doesn't make my lashes stand out from a distance, which I really do look for in a mascara. This one also does tend to smudge a little bit. I mean, you can see it doesn't look bad, but I think the Revolution one looks even better. I also want to test two setting sprays today. We have the cult favorite Urban Decay All Nighter, and one that I am still kind of testing out. This is the Revolution Sport Fix Lasting Hold Fixing Spray. So both of these are really supposed to keep your makeup locked into place. The Revolution one, they specifically say, is meant to keep your makeup on through a workout. All right, so I'm just going to try to cover this side of my face while I spray on the All Nighter. And then the Revolution Sport Fix. The mister on this Sport Fix actually is pretty good. I would say it works similarly to the Urban Decay one. On my lips, I thought it would be fun to test two really fun fruity flavored glosses. Both of these are also pretty viral right now. For the high-end side, I have the Lawless Forget the Filler lip gloss in the shade Juicy Watermelon. And for the drugstore side, I have the Covergirl Clean Fresh Yummy Gloss in You're Just Jelly. The Lawless one is this bubblegum pink shade, and this really does smell like a watermelon Jolly Rancher. This gloss is nice and thick, and it really does fill in those lines in your lips. That one does have a plumping effect. I don't think the Covergirl one claims to be clumping. You cat litter. Doesn't claim to be plumping. This one smells like strawberry jelly. It's surprising actually how similar those two colors end up looking on my lips. Since they're both sheer, they actually go on looking pretty similar. The Covergirl one, in my mind, I think of it as red, but it does go on with like a much more sheer tint. And I have to say, the Lawless one does feel a lot stickier because, as I've said before, this one actually has really good staying power for a lip gloss. It really does adhere to your lips, so that's, I think, why it has a bit of a stickier feel. It kind of has to in order to stick to your lips well. The Covergirl one, though, is getting a little bit stringy and gloopy. It does have a tendency to do that even when I don't over apply. The Covergirl one does just feel a little more drugstore to me. Even though I really enjoy the scent and I like the look and feel of it on my lips, I do feel like this one can get a little stringy. So I definitely think the Lawless side just feels a little bit more expensive. Like, I can tell the price difference between the two, but I think they both look really nice, and they're both a pleasure to put on. They smell so good, and it just kind of perks up your mood. Yeah, the Covergirl one really does smell amazing. So everything actually turned out pretty similar except for the two eye looks, which is just so funny. But it was fun to do two completely different eye looks. I really like how both turned out, but I'm really curious to see how both sides hold up throughout the day. I'm going to do about an 8-hour wear test, so I'm going to come back at the end of the evening and show you how everything wore. We'll see if there are any big differences, which side we prefer overall. Here's how it looks nice and freshly applied. Let me know if you have a favorite side now. I like both sides for different reasons. I think I like the cheek products on the high-end side a little bit better, but the eyeshadow, I don't think I could pick a favorite. I think they both look really good. So it's been about 7 or 8 hours since I applied this makeup, and I'm getting ready to wash my face for the night, so I'm here for my final wear test check-in. Here's how everything wore. I actually feel like for the most part everything held up really well. I was mostly sitting at my computer editing for the day, and I kept catching myself going like this, which I know is bad, but considering that, I really do feel like the base products held up really well, especially on the high-end side. I do feel like the base products over on the drugstore side did break apart just a little bit more, just around the mouth and nose. Over here, things still look very intact for the most part. I must have like accidentally rubbed off some of my foundation up here because there's like a line where it's missing, you can see. Not sure what happened there. We were also just watching TV, and I had my face like pressed into a blanket, so that is probably also why some of it is looking a little worn off over here. But I would say for the base products, overall high-end side wins. For the cheek products, I would say the cheek products held up really well on both sides. It doesn't look like I got much fading at all, but I really prefer the look still of the high-end side. I just feel like the blush and bronzer and everything on that side looks a lot more blended. As far as the eyeshadow, I actually feel like I got a little bit of fading over here on the high-end side with that Merit cream shadow. feel like I got a little bit of fading in my crease, which is surprising because I even have an eyeshadow primer underneath. But that Rare Beauty eyeshadow primer does often cause creasing, so that could explain that. But I think for the most part that eye still looks really nice. I really do like the look of those green shadows together. The Drugstore side held up beautifully. I didn't get any creasing or fading really. It still looks really nice. I got a little bit of smudging over here on the high-end side with that Milk Kush mascara. Not a ton, but just a little bit of flaking under this eye. No flaking or smudging on the Makeup Revolution side. And I would say both brows still look pretty good. It doesn't look like the product has faded in either of my brows. And obviously both lip glosses wore off a long time ago, but I do think of the two I prefer the Lawless gloss. So I do kind of feel like there's a clear winner here, and it's actually the high-end side, which I'm a little bummed saying that because I would love to have the Drugstore products win. I mean, I always love when Drugstore products beat out high-end alternatives, but I have to say, especially with the face products, the base, the blush, bronzer, all of that does look just a step up in quality compared to the Drugstore side, but I don't think the Drugstore side looks bad by any means either. So I always find these videos interesting. Let me know down below which side you think won the battle. Thank you guys so much for hanging out today. I hope you had fun. Don't forget I do have a Patreon and a channel membership if you're interested in supporting my channel further. I do a bonus video and a bonus live stream for my patrons and members every month. I would love to have you over there. Otherwise, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, and I will talk to you again very soon in my next video. Bye!